Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is our second season of the Memories of Plymouth program. Last year, we invited about a dozen folks to join us and share their stories, their memories of Plymouth, sharing about the community that we have. Oftentimes, we forget how important a community is, our part in a community, and how we can give back to our community. Today, I'm delighted to share with you our first invitee. His name is Harold Webster. Many of you know Harold. Some of you have heard of Mr. Webster, and some of you say, who is this man? Today, over the next hour, we're going to get to know a little bit more about Harold Webster. Harold, thank you very, very much for joining me. It's been fun getting to know you, visiting you and Joy at the house, so I'm looking forward to the stories that you have to tell us. And before we're done today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll share with you a story you might think you know, but you may not know the whole story about what we're looking at right now. Harold, for the audience, would you share what your complete formal name is?
It is Harold Adams Webster, Jr.
Junior. So your father's name was
Harold
Adams Webster Sr., and your mother's name was?
Charlotte White Webster.
All right, all right. And you, Joy's not with us today, but would you like to officially announce who your wife is to the world?
My wife's name is Joy, and she is well named. She certainly is.
I'm just getting it. I'm a little slow.
I divorced my first wife. I remarried, and my second wife's name was Barbara Brown. She was from Pittsburgh. She developed a heart problem and died. Then I married again and married Joe.
And it's been a life of joy. It's been a life of joy.
Now we've been together 30 years.
30 years. Congratulations. That's great. Would you share when you were born?
I was born on April 18th, 1919.
So if I figure that out, in a few more weeks, you're going to be 99 years old.
Right.
And will you do any kind of a celebration?
I might go to a 99 restaurant and see if I can get a free fee.
All right, that's interesting, that's interesting. All right. Where were you born?
Born in Presbyterian Hospital in downtown Concord.
In Concord. And when did you move to Holderness?
We moved to Holderness in 1923.
1923. And the reason for the move?
I think possibly it was that the house we moved to came up for sale, and this is an astounding price. My parents bought that house and 360 acres of land, including 80 acres of interval down by the river, sitting down $10,000 in 1923.
1923. So we need to share where your house is, so people know the Webster house is located traveling south on 175, am I correct? On the left-hand side, just as we have just passed Trinity Cemetery.
Correct.
And it's a large brick building.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you would have had land on both sides of the roads, correct?
Yes.
All right, all right. Do you have history on the background of that house for our audience today?
We found a brick which was separate, it was not used in the construction. And the person had taken and written with a finger 1824 on the brick.
Wow. And who did it
And
belong to?
the house was built by a sea captain by the name of Russell Cox.
Cox, C-O-X.
Right. And his daughter was Myra Clark, and she married a fellow by the name of John Evans, and they lived there for years.
And
So they were the seller when my parents bought the place.
So it sounds like that 2 generations, the sea captain and his daughter, lived there for about 100 years before your parents purchased the house in 1923.
23.
And then you held on to the family house until when?
Say that again?
When was it sold? When did your family sell the house? Or maybe to who?
I think it was in the early 1970s,
70s.
72 for a guess.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
And who would be the person that purchased the house? Can you recall that?
No,
Okay. Was it the radio station man?
that's it.
That's
Yep.
it. So his name was Bill Morse. Does that sound right? No?
No,
Okay. Okay, good. Dick Morse.
no, I
No?
don't think it was Morse at all.
All right. Okay.
No.
We'll figure that one out as we go on. Let's talk about, if we can, for a few minutes, your education. You went to school primarily in the Plymouth Schools, the elementary, the junior high, and the high school. And they would have been 3 separate buildings.
No, there were 2.
Oh,
The model school, I went there for 8th grade.
all
Then I
right.
went to Plymouth High School, which was next door.
Right.
It's now, I don't know, our high school was demolished.
In the early 70s. Early 70s. And they ended up moving the school where it is now located.
You know,
So you're telling me the elementary school that we know of, that I know of, was not built at that time, and the model school, which is now called Memorial Building, that housed, instead of my junior high school, it was your 1st through 8th grade. 1st
Correct.
through 8th grade. Got it, got it. Do you remember some of the teachers that you had at all that you would like to share?
I remember our 1st grade teacher's name was Marion Seavey. And then, I don't remember what grade, but we had another teacher by the name of Anna Brown. And I believe her husband worked in Lester Avery's mill.
And I don't know where Lester Avery's mill is, so you're going to have to give me directions.
Lester Avery's mill is long gone.
Okay. Okay. On the main street?
Actually, it was in Holderness, just across the bridge
Oh,
on the right.
by Grossman's, where Grossman's was located. Some of us might be able to identify with that.
Grossman took it over.
Oh, all right, all right. Avery's and then Grossman's. Avery's and then Grossman's. Makes sense. That does make some sense. How did you get to school?
Well, usually we walked,
From your house?
a mile and a half.
All right.
And I grew up with the Huckins boys. The oldest one was Elton, and then Morris, Milton, and later on they had Herbert, who was named after his grandfather Chase. But I didn't know him because he was quite a bit younger.
And they would bring you to school?
We either walked or sometimes we hitched up the horse and went with a Democrat wagon that we had. And in the winter we used an eggshell sleigh.
Wow.
And if the weather was really bad, we got a ride with either our hired man or my mother would take us in the car.
A Democrat
wagon.
wagon, and I'm so sorry, I don't know what that is.
Well,
Just the name that you would attach to it, or?
I think it had 3 seats, the one in front, and then one in the middle and one in the back. And the one in the middle and the one in the back were removable.
Oh, wow.
You had a little step to step up to get into the rig.
You had mentioned to me once at the house that some of the students came in via train. They came to school on a train.
A train from Woodsville came down the Baker Valley in the summer. It was scheduled so that they arrived at the high school or at the depot in time for the school opening in the high school. They had another train come down the Plymouth Valley. They did the same thing. In the afternoon, they left around 4 o'clock in the afternoon and take the kids home.
Interesting, interesting.
And on the Plymouth Valley, most of the kids from Thornton south rode the train.
Thank you, thank you. We're moving into high school. Some memories that you had. It could be teachers that you had, subjects that you remember you took, extracurricular, sports perhaps, but it doesn't have to be sports.
Well, because I lived on a farm, I had chores to do. So I didn't get into high school sports until my junior year, and because I had chores to do in the afternoon, so once in a while I'd get in on practice. And in my senior year, I played football, and I played left end on offense and right end on defense.
You played both offense and defense.
We didn't have enough kids for 2 teams, so we played both ways, offense and defense. And we played with an unbalanced line on offense because our left tackle was Ken Witcher from Warren, and he was a pretty big kid. He was probably about 6'4", 5", and weighed around 280 pounds. And I played next to him in the left end, and when we had the ball, he'd come back from the huddle and Ken would say, whisper to me, he says, "Never mind these guys up front, I'll take care of them. You go back in the backfield and mess them up." So we did. We won quite a few games.
And your coach at that time would have been?
George Jack Dawson.
Jack
And
Dawson.
he coached all the sports that we had, which were not very many. He coached girls basketball, boys basketball, baseball, football. That was it. We didn't have any other sports.
I'm trying to think about football. What kind of equipment would you have had then? Did you have to purchase the equipment, or did the school purchase it for you?
We had to purchase our own shoes, and they had hard rubber knobs on them about that high. And they were, when we went from the high school over to D&M Park to play football, we had to be very careful on the sidewalk that was paved because they were slippery. But we made it. And, well,
I'm trying to think of some of the teams you would have played at that time.
well, believe it or not, Groveton had a team, Lancaster, Berlin, St. Johnsbury, Laconia, Franklin, and Catholic school in Claremont. I think St. Mary's, I think the name was.
So a few are still scheduled with the high school football team, but there's some in the North Country that I'm not sure they have a football team anymore.
No, they don't.
They don't. They don't.
St. Johnsbury might, but nothing in Groveton or Lancaster. I think, no, I don't think even Berlin has a team.
If I asked you what you did for fun when you were a kid, what would it be?
Number one would be living on a farm.
That was fun.
Yep.
And why so? What did you do on that farm on a daily basis, I would assume, that you thought was really fun?
Well, I had to feed the cows and the horses, and the horse stalls were separate on one side of the barn from the tie-up, and the watering trough was in the tie-up. So we had to leave the horses out of the stalls across the barn floor over to the horse trough and the tie-up so they could drink water. And we did not have a tractor. We did everything by hand with horses. And the hay, we had 80 acres of hay field down on the interval, and a pair of dapple grays, and they'd pull that hay rack up the road up to the barn, and we had to pitch the hay off by hand.
Did you have friends that had as much fun, and so they would say, I want to come and help you on the farm? I'm just...
No.
That's fun.
No, we had a hired man, and he did most of the milking, but I think he had one Sunday a month off, and every fourth Sunday I had to milk the cows morning and night.
It sounds really fun. It sounds
Fortunately, we didn't have many cows.
You finish high school and you move on to higher education. You end up going to...
Went down to Durham at UNH.
And studied?
My major was geology and minored in civil engineering.
What did you do with a background in geology?
You mean what I did for work? Well, my first job was Seismograph Service Corporation, headquarters in Tulsa, and they worked all over the world locating oil. And that was my first job. So I worked for them about 4 years, and they kept deferring me from the draft. Of course, that was during World War II. And finally they ran out of people and scraped the bottom of the barrel and gave me instructions to go to Manchester for pre-induction physical. I was in Wamego, Kansas at the time. So I went to Manchester and flunked the physical because of eyesight or lack thereof. And it's since been corrected. And the draft board, the guy said, "You're doing more good for the country on what you're doing than you would be by us putting you in a limited service behind a desk."
Behind a desk is limited service.
Yeah. So then I got aboard with the highway department in the state, and I worked for them 23 years on mostly new construction.
And you had that job because you had a minor in civil engineering from UNH.
Yeah.
From UNH. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If I give you a word, something that has to do with the main street, can you respond to it? Let's try it and see what happens. We may fail on this, all right? Tufts Block. What do you remember about Tufts Block? Anything come to mind?
I remember the Jock brothers had a meat market on the east end of it,
Interesting.
and there was somebody, I believe they had a little glove making shop.
Oh, Tanner.
I
Okay.
don't remember much about it. The main thing I remember about the Tufts Block is when it burned. It was a wooden block. And I remember my mother driving me to school that day, and we went around the common and started up Highland Street and looked, and the building is entirely gone.
Wow.
Wiped right
Wow.
out.
Wow. First National.
First National Stores?
The one that would have been on the main street of Plymouth.
Yeah.
Is that where you said, you need to help me out on this, when we were chit-chatting, did Adams's go in the site of the First National Store?
Yes.
All right.
I did have a store. Well, somewhere north of Turnage Barber Shop.
Oh, all right, all right.
And then they had the larger store down on Main Street.
This is Adams now we're talking about. So Adams moved in there around probably the latter part, 1940s, 1948, 49,
I
I
would
think.
say so.
Yeah, I think that's what I've read in the past before. Reggie Huckins gasoline station. I mention it because I haven't heard of it before.
His gas station was let's see.
I have it with it. You told me, but tell me if I'm wrong, where Lasade's Diner was? I may have written it down wrong, but where Lasade's Diner was, and then right next to Lasade's Diner would have been the hotel that they had owned. You could get rooms there,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to remember.
About where the Meredith Savings Bank is now.
Absolutely,
Out in
absolutely.
that area.
All right, some of us may not remember Lasade's Diner, but somebody else will remember the Meredith Savings. You're correct. How much did they charge if I wanted to stay at Lasade's apartment complex? How much would it cost me per night? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I can remember there was a sign up on the second floor of the building. It said rooms $1.
$1. $1. All right. No comments on that one.
Edgar and Lillian Lasade ran it,
That's right. That's right.
along with the diner.
Let's see. You shared with me Samahas, and I'm a Samaha. The one Samaha you're talking about was across the street. So we have Bridge Street, we have Main Street. The complex is no longer there. The stone building is no longer there. It held 2 or 3. But the Samahas you were talking about was Abdel Noor Samahas. And what type of a...
His wife, Madeline.
What kind of a store did they run?
It was a clothing store, and I think they sold shoes there too.
Shoes. Interesting.
But
Interesting.
clothing was the main item.
I'm going to switch. We have a picture in front of us now that you are looking at. Can you share with us some information and how it's related to you?
Well, there were 2 boys that posed for the sculptor, George Borst, who was from the Philadelphia area. So in the summer of 1933, I believe it was, I posed for George Borst on the porch of a cottage that he was running down by Hillside Inn in Newfound Lake. And the following winter, George Borst went back home to Philadelphia, and a boy from down there posed. And he lucked out because, like most sculptors, they have to have somebody pose in the nude, which the boy did, and he got paid, but I didn't get any pay at all.
So can we go back to Mr. Borsch?
Only just a sore knee, that's all.
So you were in this position for considerable length of time,
Oh,
do you think?
yes.
I guess.
About an hour at a time.
Wow, wow. And you have beautiful curly locks there. Curly locks, I can see. You have your hands clasped in a particular situation. And am I seeing water coming out of there as well?
I think it came down through the left arm, the right arm, I believe.
And then it would fall down to the bottom of the boulder.
Yeah.
And
The boulder came from Franconia Notch and was picked out by Mose Batchelor, who ran a store about where the post office is now. And the pothole, the bottom, that the water drips into, came from a pothole in
Wentworth, New Hampshire.
just downstream of the old bridge.
The reading that I've done said this was one of 2 Boy Scout statues that we had at that time in the entire United States. So very rare.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about the sculpture? How someone connected with him to get them to do this for us?
He was a friend of George Clark,
And for the audience, who is George Clark?
who lived in the big house where Harris Furniture is now.
Yeah, do that. And they knew each other,
Yes,
and as a result, George Clark requested him to
Yeah.
do this on our common.
yes.
Very nice, very nice. All right. Let's go back to storytelling. I'm sorry, that was a great story. It's a great story. You have worked for the state for years and years. And as we've been chatting several times at the house, we talk about the town of Plymouth. With your background, and you had a little bit to do with 93 along the way, but just looking at the way our town is now set up and decades of experience on your part, wouldn't it be fun if I asked you, what could we do as we look at the town of Plymouth and the way it is today, getting busier and busier? Is there any way you would change the town layout so it might be a benefit to the town?
Well, I look at the city of Berlin. If you're going north through downtown Berlin, you bear to the right, going north, you go up Main Street. And if you're coming south, Main Street, Pleasant Street split north of the main part of town, and so going south you go down Pleasant Street. And Plymouth, you could extend Green Street from where it is past the old depot and follow the railroad south of the main part of Main Street and exit probably the bottom of the hill at the south end of Main Street.
Warren Street, maybe. I'm not sure.
Maybe just south of that.
So we'd have two streets parallel to each other, Main Street, Green Street, and that's possibly one way to consider easing the congestion that we have during certain times of the day. Interesting thought to think about.
A lot of the stores have rear entrances, and instead of a delivery truck plugging up traffic on Main Street, they could be down on the back side of those stores.
Okay, good thought. Anything else you'd like to do since we're just chatting? Is there other things we can do in town that maybe our town fathers could think about? This would ease the congestion here.
Well, on Highland Street and High Street, university students on crosswalks. Of course, they have the right of way. But maybe an overhead pedestrian bridge would be in order.
An overhead. So where they currently cross.
It would be less expensive than a tunnel.
Oh, interesting.
The only problem I can visualize would be snow removal.
Oh, interesting. So this is your background, civil engineering. Thank you for those thoughts. Something to think about. At a cost. At a cost.
Oh.
All right. A few more questions, if you don't mind. I think about your time here, and you were born in Concord, you lived in Holderness, and did you go away for any amount of time and then you came back to Holderness? You now live on Prospect Hill Road.
Well, I think, as I mentioned, I worked for Southern Grass Service, and taught it down at the university as an instructor in the geology department for, I think, 2 or maybe 3 years.
Is this when you just received your degree and you continued there, or did you go back there?
I went back there in 47, 48, 49, because they had an influx of students because of the GI Bill
Beautiful.
at the end of World War II.
That seemed to be happening at all the colleges and universities. Population was
And,
increasing.
Some of the courses that the students took required a physical science, which of course geology is one of them. And when the GI Bill ran out, why, I went out too.
No comment.
I enjoyed my first year of teaching, but the second year, the kids, of course, they had different faces, but they asked the same stupid questions.
I'm shutting the camera off, Mr. Webster, on that. I mean, there's a few people that aren't sure why they should be in college.
I didn't last long as a teacher.
Okay. But again, once your parents sold the house over in Holderness, you went to work. Why did you come back to Holderness?
When did I come back to Holderness?
Why did you come back?
Oh, why?
Yeah. I think it's an obvious reason, but I'm not sure. When did you arrive back here? We sold the house in the early 70s, the Webster house that we refer to it. And and then once they sold the house, did you get married and you moved elsewhere? Did you stay in Holderness?
No. I bought a house on School Street in Rumney.
In Rumney.
The house is still there. It's just west of the Russell School.
Great. But then over the years, you come back to Holderness and purchase a house on.
Bought that house in 1945,
Right.
and 9 acres of land, most of it field, for $7,500.
And what was the other house now? $10,000 did you pay for the Webster house plus 300 and help me 60 acres?
360 acres.
All right.
80 acres of it was field. And probably 15 and 20 acres of pasture.
Pasture. Okay.
We didn't have many cows, but we did have maybe 10 milkers.
You have a getaway house. That's my word, getaway house. Your address shows me at Holderness, but it also has an address of Pittsburgh,
Berg.
north and south. Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, close to the border of Canada.
It's the last last town going north out of the state of New Hampshire.
And what enticed you to have a house up there, a getaway up there?
Well, number one, I bought a business in 1970, Tall Timber Lodge,
Tall Timber Lodge.
which consisted of 10 log cabins on the shore of Back Lake, and the main lodge with 7 rooms to rent. The dining room sat 85 people, and of course the kitchen was there, and the dance hall, which was part of the lodge, and that was probably about 50 by 20 in size. A nice hardwood floor. Beautiful.
And does it still exist?
The dance hall is now split up into 2 or 3 bedrooms.
So we see you moving up there during the summer months, sometimes.
all the time.
All the time, as much as you can. All right, I got it. I got it. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing.
I've been visiting Pittsburgh since 1935.
What entices you? What's different about Pittsburgh, perhaps? And it's calling your name.
I have some unpleasant memories about holiness. And this is kind of personal. But my parents had problems. They ended up in divorce. And that's all I can think about every time I go by that house.
So your house up in Pittsburgh takes you away.
You know? I owned and operated Tall Timber Lodge for 12 years.
12. Wow.
My wife developed heart problems and passed away. In the meantime, I had purchased a small camp on the First Connecticut Lake, and when I sold the camps, I built a wood cedar log home on the site, and I lived there till 2004.
So it is a getaway, isn't it? My word is
So
okay.
now we have a travel trailer at Spruce Cone Campground overlooking Lake Francis
Nice.
in Pittsburgh.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And I'm very anxious for spring to come
It's a
so
coming.
they can turn the water on in the campground and we can go back up there.
Another month. Let's project another month or two. Another month or
Right.
two. If we had a group of young children around you right now, if we had some young adults here, as we close down today, is there something you'd like to say to them? Wisdom that you have because of the decades you've been here, experiences that you have gone through. What would you share with this group right here?
Well, I think the number one thing would be stay away from all tobacco products. That's a big no-no as far as I'm concerned. The second thing, abide by the Ten Commandments. And I'll tell you a little story about that after we're off the air.
Okay, no comments. Anything else you'd like to share with them at all? That might be enough. That might be enough. I want to thank you for...
Stay active.
Thank you. That's a good one. With my background, stay active. Keep moving. Keep moving.
Right.
It sounds great. Well, it's been my pleasure to work with you. Hal and I have chit-chatted over the last year or so several times at his house. The stories are many. We both agree Plymouth is a great community. The surrounding areas, great community. This is our opportunity to give back to those that tune into us every month or so. So I want to thank you one more time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I mean that.
Likewise. Enjoyed every bit of it.
This is so fun. And they're paying me big bucks to do this too. We're kidding. We're kidding. It's just so fun to go into people's homes that are willing to receive us, the Historical Society, and share your memories. And I think I'm going to say the same thing that I did every time last year. Keep taking pictures. When you view this video, it's been edited in such a way that you see downtown Plymouth behind us, but we also have tried to illuminate a little bit, receive pictures from the people that we're interviewing, and that's usually put in on the end. But if you have pictures at home and you have a great story to share, if you would please think about taking the back of it and just writing that story down, when it took place, And sometimes those stories have special meaning, and when we're gone, when I'm no longer here, people will be able to see some of the joy of why you took that one picture, a good memory of Plymouth. So thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.